Here's the truth. Once your child turns 18, you can't control them anymore, but you can influence them, and it all comes down to how you stay connected. Welcome to All About You. I'm Dr. Shauna Watts, GP and women's health advocate. On this podcast, we talk about the big transitions in midlife that often go unspoken. Today, we're tackling one that keeps so many mums awake at night: how to parent young adults once they've stepped into independence. Do you support them? Do you step back? Do you set boundaries around money, relationships, or lifestyle choices? It's not easy, and it's rarely straightforward. To guide us through, I'm joined by Kim Muench, certified parent coach, founder of Real Life Parent Guide, and a trusted voice on conscious parenting, featured on Fox News Radio, national TV segments, and podcasts worldwide. Now, if you haven't listened to our previous episode about parenting teens through the high school years, go back and listen, as it was a great conversation packed with helpful tips and strategies. Today, we're talking about the next step of parenting young adults. Kim is a mum herself to 5 now adult children, so she understands firsthand the roller coaster of emotions that comes with watching your kids pull away, test boundaries, and step into independence. By the end of this episode, you'll learn why your role as a parent changes but doesn't end, how to support independence without losing connection, and practical strategies for staying close to your adult kids without overstepping. Remember, this is general information only, not personal medical advice. Always consult your own healthcare provider for guidance. So, Kim, I know that we both know that parenting doesn't end whenever kids turn 18, but it definitely changes. And I know that this is a group that you love to work with, so parents of people 18 to nearly 30. And I think that that is definitely a time that it can be hard to navigate what your role is and how much you should say and how much you shouldn't say and how much you should butt in and how much you should shut up. And then I think one of the other things that you talked about is, we talk about empty nesters or bird launchers, but, there are also definitely a group of our children and this generation who don't seem to be launching successfully for many reasons. Economically, I suppose the stereotypical story, but unfortunately it is one that I do hear reasonably frequently, is the young male who's maybe always been a little bit quieter, a little bit shyer, who loves video games and who's now, I don't know, 22, 23. He lies on the sofa and plays his game. He doesn't have a job, or if he does, he has like 1 or 2 shifts a week at a job just to give him enough money to literally survive. And the parents don't know what to do. Is this a group that you're working with?
This is, yes. I call, some people would call that failure to launch. I call it lost in place, because I truly believe that if you are lost, and that is what's happening with a lot of, I would say, more young men than young women. That's not to say that this is not happening with young women, but I do hear about it more prevalently with young men. When parents come to me with that type of scenario, we talk about the pattern that's playing out. What is the pattern? There's a pattern typically that dad has, that mom has, that this emerging adult, more often than not, son has. So I'll just use the scenario of a son. There's a pattern that's playing out in the house. And I want the parents to be able to self-reflect and identify, like, what is my part in this pattern that's playing out at home? Sometimes it is mom is playing the middle guy between dad, who's super type A, angry, doesn't understand this kid, and her son, who may be struggling with anxiety, depression, and she's highly empathetic to that. Right? So she's stuck in the middle. So recognizing what is my part. Some parents, both mom and dad, do not like conflict, and they will avoid it. Some young people can be masters at avoiding conflict. What are the dynamics that are playing out? That's the first thing we look at. Second, I talk to parents about, what do you feel your son is capable of based on history, like based on what they were like in the previous last several years, what they're doing day to day now, And then let's start to create a plan. It's going to be small steps, very small steps. I mean, I work with parents who have sons that are so addicted to gaming, they haven't taken showers in weeks. Like the first goal is showering, once a week. Like it's not, this family didn't get here overnight. It is not going to be a quick miracle answer to this. It comes down to 4 C's. One, parents getting very clear on where they stand in terms of, again, I go back to talking about values. What are our values? What our values might include working hard or having a job, and our kid has like no job or is very underemployed. This is not how we raised him, and we can't continue to foster an environment where this goes on. Like this is not healthy for him. It's not healthy for us. The second C is clear, calm. Be able to communicate and with clarity, right where they stand, what the expectations are, calmly, even if their son is getting dysregulated, because often that's what happens. They don't like the conversation. This kid either shuts down or starts yelling at the parents, and the parents then get angry and they're very triggered, and nothing ever gets resolved because nobody can stay calm. So working with parents on how to stay calm even when you're triggered. Third, confidence. Parents, if they've been in this lost in place type situation for a long time, they've lost their confidence as parents. They've tried everything. They've tried everything they can think of, and they're like banging their head against the wall. They don't think this is ever going to end. They don't see how it could possibly be fixed, and they're lacking confidence, which means that their son really kind of holds all the cards. So reminding parents, helping them regain their confidence in the role that they play, very important. And then the number 4C, which is very, very important, and sometimes the hardest one for my parents that I work with to keep up, is consistency. Their words and their actions need to be in alignment. Talked about a consequence, they need to follow through. I always say to parents, do not say something that you're not going to follow through on. If you have a son or a daughter who never follows through on things, what are you modeling? And this is not to say parents need to be perfect people. And it's a practice. But clarity, calm, confidence, and consistency is really what's required in order to move this lost in place, stuck, emerging adult forward.
That's so helpful, because I think part of the thing in that type of situation is that people feel they don't know where to start. And as you say, emotions just escalate and everyone gets angry or upset, and then they get worried, especially if they have perhaps a child who does have mental health concerns. So then they're afraid that they're going to push the person over the edge, etc. And then, of course, that can be used as a weapon as well.
For sure. Absolutely. And so, talking about that in the context of our sessions, like I always want to honor and be respectful of someone's mental health, right? I mean, anxiety, depression. I have a son that has struggled most of his life with it. So I can relate to this as a parent and can appreciate. The problem becomes when parents are so focused and their kid's whole identity becomes that anxiety and depression, that is unhealthy. When that's all you're focused on as a parent, it can freeze you. It can absolutely, like, I can't ask him to do this because he's depressed, and that might, set him off or whatever. Again, we have to have a healthy respect for mental health issues that young people are going through, while also not so focused on that there's no movement at all.
Whenever we're talking about anxiety, I think parents can let their own anxiety really creep in when they're really starting to need to let go of this young adult. And they want to show up with love and support and and kindness, but then their own anxiety about all the what ifs and what if this happens and what if that happens can make that parent who sort of started off a conversation thinking they're just going to be really supportive, and then the next thing they know they're kind of back trying to control the whole narrative of the scenario. What would your approach to that be, with a parent who knows that they are doing that?
So I run a parent support group twice a week, and there's typically about 30 parents on the call from around the world, really. I often say to them, what is your work to do and what is their work to do? Stop trying to do their work for them, and you need to focus on yourself. When parents are anxious, that is whether they're saying anything or not, they're energetically giving off that anxiety. Their kids know when they're anxious. Their kids know when they're not coming from a place of, being confident in their parenting at all. And it is both a disservice to the parent and the child when parents are coming from a place of, lack, and a place of like, I'm not sure of myself. Their parents are leaders. So it's important for parents to do their own emotional work and to not to, if they need to work with a professional therapist or someone that they can go, someone who's not emotionally attached to the family, and they can really talk things through so that they're not projecting that energy, that anxiety onto their kid and making things worse, because that happens on a regular basis.
We talk a lot about helicopter parenting, and I think whenever people think of helicopter parents, they think of, a child at the playground and the parents literally hovering beside them. But I think that it can continue, and that, we can want to swoop in whenever we see our young adults struggling, whether it's financially or whether it's uni stress or whether something's happened at a job and we think their boss has treated them terribly or they've had a relationship that breaks down. And I think parents can have that real difficulty of to know when to step in and when to step out. And just, again, I suppose we've talked about those consequences, but do you have any guidance around how to manage that?
I think our role shifts, right, as our kids move out of their teens and into their 20s, and really to a place of we want to be a safe space to listen, right? We can't fix it for them. I ask parents to think about, go back to your own late teens and 20 something years and think about the kinds of experiences that you had, that the kind of tough, maybe unhealthy choices you made at times, the lessons that were learned through that. That is all needed and natural. And so when you step in or try and make things okay for your son or daughter, you're robbing them of that ability to learn, to learn whatever lesson, or to develop that resilience and that grit that needs to be developed. Our role at this stage, I mean, even with, I have 3 in their 20s. I feel like my role is to listen, to understand who they are, to meet them where they're at. While I may not love or understand some of the beliefs or some of the lifestyle choices that they're making, my job is not to judge that, but rather to support them in whatever way I can. And I definitely have kids that have beliefs that they weren't brought up with, affiliations they, like, that I would not choose for them, but I have to respect, and I've seen them respect each other. I think that's a beautiful thing when you have multiple kids and they are on vastly different paths in their lives and have different beliefs, and they can find the best in each other and connect on that and not focus on where they're different but where they are the same. I think that's one of the most inspiring things that can happen in a family. I don't know why. I don't know if you were under the same delusion that I was, that, we're going to raise these kids and they're all going to kind of be the same and whatever. And I'm not sure why I was under that delusion, but I couldn't have 5 more different people that have come through this body.
Do you know, I heard this really interesting thing, a comment or an explanation the other day, and it said, you think that every one of your children have had the same parent, but every child has actually had a different parent, because with every child you've been a different person, because you have learned and grown, and you've maybe had positive experiences or or negative experiences, but either way it's continued to mold how you approach and potentially parent that next child. And I always think that's really interesting, because parents often say, oh, I just don't understand, because they've all been raised the same way and they've all lived in the same house and they all had the same opportunities, and yet, you know, this one is X but this one is Y, and I just don't understand.
Gabor Mate maybe said something like that. I'm not sure. I've heard the same thing, but I clearly wasn't the same parent to my son Nick at 18 as I was to my daughter Mia when she was born at 36. You know, I clearly was not, right, the same parent, and my marriage wasn't the same. And, you know, so our finances probably weren't all the things that go into family. And every kid has a different personality and temperament. So we're adapting to each one of those as well. So yeah, when parents say, but we parented them all the same, not true, because you know, again, we evolve as people and through our life experience. So I 100% believe that each of my kids has gotten somebody different. I've tried to have some of the same elements, you know, I really work at being non-judgmental. I really work at respecting who they are as human beings and the choices that they're making. And fortunately for me, they've in turn done the same for me.
And Kim, can I ask you, I know that you said that with all your kids, and like me, there's some decisions you like, some you don't like. Do you bite your tongue, or do you say, like, I don't love that, or I don't like that choice, but I'm of course still support you? Or some of the time, do you just bite your tongue and say nothing?
I'd probably bite my tongue. I haven't had the opportunity, but I could see myself saying, while I don't agree with that, I have to respect that this is the step that you want to take. I hope that it will be the right step for you. Like I would say that if I were in that position.
100%. And one of the things that I have to say, I do have a lovely group of sort of teens and early young adult patients, and one of their complaints is that they always say they get emotionally blackmailed by their parents. That's their phrase, not mine. They'll say that whenever they won't do what their parent wants them to do, even though they now perceive themselves as being an adult, they feel like they get blackmailed by the list of things that their mum or dad have done for them or given to them. And so they feel that that's sort of the old nugget that's pulled out whenever nobody can think of anything else to say. Well, it's like, look at everything I've done for you. Look at everything I've given to you. Look at all the things that I've bought you. And I can't believe that you won't do this one thing that I want you to do. Obviously, it's mostly parents listening, but how do we resist the urge to do that? Because I think it's a trap that people do fall into.
What I'm going to say here is probably going to be unpopular, but what it makes me think of is that is a parent who is very emotionally immature. This is not a transactional relationship. You went into parenting knowing that there was going to be sacrifices and whatnot. And if you've chosen to give your children X, Y, and Z, even if it's above whatever would be expected, this is not a transactional relationship. I really think that stop going above and giving, you know, but don't say to the kid, you owe me, because essentially that's what they're saying is you owe me because I have given this to you. And, you know, I think that is a very poor example and breeds, again, a disconnected relationship with your kid. That's not a genuine relationship that you're building.
This episode is brought to you by my 16-week Rediscover You program, designed specifically for women navigating the challenges of perimenopause and menopause. If you're dealing with disrupted sleep, mood changes, or unexplained weight gain, this evidence-based program combines medical guidance, practical tools, and a supportive community to help you take control of your health. Women have reported significant improvements in symptom management of sleep quality and overall well-being. As an All About You listener, when you mention the podcast, you'll gain priority access for our next intake. Click the link in the show notes to learn more and join. I'd love to help you rediscover the vibrant, confident version of yourself. We do have parents who are struggling to handle the whole financial burden of adult children. So perhaps, their child is not is struggling to get a job or hold down a job, or they perhaps are making life choices like choosing to game or choosing to drink a lot of alcohol or take drugs, but the parent doesn't want to see them without a roof over their head or without clothes. And so there's this really tension and dynamic as to, do you give money because you know the money's being used for alcohol or drugs or whatever, but also then, but if you don't give money, then your child literally will be out on the street. And I think that's a real tension for parents to navigate.
When I'm working with parents, and this is often like, it's funny because they may have behaviors going on under the roof that they hate. It could be the gaming all night. It could be, underemployment, if not unemployed entirely. It could be my kid is using my credit card for Uber Eats. Well, stop that. I mean, like, cut off the credit, I'll tell parents, listen, we got to work on what you control. And there's three things that you control. One, how you are showing up in this relationship, how you are presenting yourself in this relationship. Are you critical? Are you rescuing? Are you, how are you showing up? What's your tone of voice? So these are the things, this, you control how you show up in the relationship. Second, you control what you're willing to provide them at this point, now that they are over majority, or they're not a minor any longer. You control that. Third, you control how you respond to their words and their behaviors. So you control how you're responding back to them. These are the things that we know that you control. What you don't control is their behavior. You cannot control their behavior. You cannot control if they really need mental health or substance use help and they refuse to get it. If they're an adult, you don't have control over that. Then the parents will say, I hate all these, this dynamic that's playing out in my house, and yet I would never throw my kid out of the house. So it makes it difficult, right? Not that, as someone who had to leave home at 18, I am not advocating for that unless a parent is feeling physically unsafe, and then nobody should live in that situation. So we have to look at, how can we create a plan where incrementally you are stepping back from what you're providing so that they have the opportunity to take on the responsibility for themselves. So that is a lot of what I work with parents on, is like, what are you providing? What small steps can we begin to take backward? And one thing that has been incredibly common, the common factor in all of the cases that I work on with parents, is the phone. The phone is the number one thing that their son or daughter spends a lot of time on. Yes, they might be gaming or whatever, but the phone is central. We all are very attached to having the phone. And we also don't know what our adult children are viewing online. And I don't necessarily mean porn. I mean, what kind of information is coming into them that is feeding them a lot of this, hopelessness about the future and that they'll never amount to anything. Like, you can be the best parent role model, but if everything they're feeding themselves through that phone and through the Discord and whatever else they're doing online is negativity and you're not worth anything, that is a huge thing to try and counter. Typically, in the United States, depending on the phone, right, it might be 50 to 100, maybe it's slightly more than that, depending on whatever the phone is, $1 a month. You are continuing to provide a main thing that sucks in their time and that is giving them the information that's keeping them hopeless.
Yeah, you're supplying the
So
drive.
let's start there. Let's start there. I'm not saying throw the kid out of the house, but I am saying you are providing a tool for them literally to get lost in every day. Do you want to continue to provide that tool? And that's just one, again, small step in what it is I do with parents. To go back to, I look at, what are the parents, how are they involved? Do they have the ability to self-reflect, and do they want to work on a new approach? Are they willing to work at practicing collaboration with their emerging adult? How can we work on this problem together? There's a problem here. Define the problem and how can we work on this together? And it may take a number of attempts before the young person really understands. My parents are actually wanting my input. My parents actually do want me to give some ideas on how we can fix this. I'm not happy. I want to get the hell out of my parents' house too. How can we work together on this so that it's successful?
Do we have any research or understanding as to why we seem to have this cohort who are in this position? I mean, of course, there's definitely a financial side of things in that housing is so expensive. Perhaps training requirements for certain jobs are just so long, and I know certainly in the US and even in Australia, going to university and tertiary education is very expensive. And yet, if you look back just a few generations ago, it was, people were often out working in jobs from they were 16, 17 years old, or, maybe 18, and were out of home much earlier. And yet we didn't seem to have that issue then. And it seems to be something that is a bigger and bigger problem now.
Well, and I don't honestly think that every kid has to leave home by 20 years of age or 22 or whatever. I think the parents that I work with would actually be fine with their emerging adults or adult children living at home as long as they're contributing, as long as they're financially contributing, as long as they're contributing to the upkeep of the house. I don't think every kid has to move out of the house. In fact, because of the economics, we are probably looking at more multi-generational family living situations. It's all about, are they contributing, or are they still acting like a teenager who doesn't want to grow up? That's the problem.
Yeah, 100%. Have you had to navigate? I've only had this really one time recently, but it was really challenging for the family, where they were having to navigate a really very aggressive young adult who was in their house and who was really quite intimidating to everyone else living in the house. But again, they were quite scared of what would happen if they didn't allow him to stay. Is that something that you've come across?
I was just actually working with a couple yesterday, and they have a son who's 23 who they had a big altercation with him over the weekend. And I said, why did you not call 911? Why did you not, because he is ruling the house at the moment, and these parents are scared. And while I'm not sure what the police would have done, I think it sends a very strong message to this young adult who is not able to regulate their emotions that my parents are not going to put up with this, because you can't spank or ground a 23-year-old son, right? You need to show them a higher level of authority if what you're doing as a parent is not effective. And unfortunately, many parents, I have had the experience of calling 911 on my son. I didn't want to do it, and I don't think parents want to do it. But there are moments when, again, if it's a safety issue, that you have to do what is best for everybody in this situation, to let siblings be privy to watching an older sibling, take over the household and be violent is not okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you've shared your part of your son's story. I think a lot of parents do struggle with navigating sort of alcohol, partying, other risky behaviors in their young adult children, and again, knowing where to draw the line, whether they should say something, whether they shouldn't say something, whether they're going to just alienate their child. And I think I know what you're going to say, but I'd love you to tell me how you would approach that. I think you're going to say approach it with honesty and to say, your truth and that you are looking out for their safety, and have the conversation, but of course not, scream and yell about it. But I'd love to know how you would approach that now, even based on your experience and your learnings, because I'm sure you didn't get it always right at the beginning. Right.
Well, first of all, denial can be an incredibly prevalent and real thing in a parent's life. I myself was in denial about my son's problem for, there were signs there that I didn't see. And when he did admit to me that he had a problem and he wanted help, even then, getting him into help was a real battle, because he, like many other people who are under the influence, they want to go and they want help 1 minute, and the next minute they're fine and they don't need help. So it can be incredibly back and forth. I always treated the situation with truth. In my case, it was, Nick, here's what I'm seeing. It's not hearsay, right? These are the observations that I am making. And because I've seen you in this situation, and because you now have a DUI, at driving under the influence, because you can't get to work, this tells me that you don't have control over the drinking. I believe you need a higher level of help. I cannot make you get that help, but I also can't sit by as your parent who loves you and not tell you that I see you on a path of self-destruction.
Yeah, I think that's a very hard conversation for a parent to have, but I think it's one that allows for open conversation as opposed to just telling the person what they have to do next.
Yeah, that's going to go nowhere very fast, right? And I tell parents in this situation, you might have to have this conversation a number of times. I don't know what that number is, but you may have to. This is not you have it once, they said, no, I don't want help, and then you just give up and no, you revisit calmly with clarity and confidence and truth. You revisit this conversation and you offer help often. You continue to have that conversation. There is always hope.
So let's pause for an evidence check. One of the reasons parenting teens feels so intense is because of what's happening inside their brains. Research shows the human brain isn't fully mature until the mid-20s. The last area to finish developing is the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for planning, impulse control, and decision making. That means during adolescence, the brakes aren't fully online yet. At the same time, the limbic system, the part of the brain that processes rewards and emotions, is highly active. This mismatch explains why teens are more likely to take risks like speeding, drinking, or pushing limits, struggle with impulse control, and swing between extreme emotions and demanding independence. It's not that your teen is being deliberately difficult. Their brain wiring is still under construction. Studies using MRI scans show that the prefrontal cortex continues refining connections well until the mid-20s. Boundaries and structure aren't about control. They give teenagers the external scaffolding their brains still need while they build internal control. That's why your presence, your consistency, and your calm matter so much in these years. Kim, the last group that I kind of want to talk a little bit about is those parents who've been cut off from their kids, who the kids just have decided they don't want to have contact, and there's this person's truth and this person's truth, and what this person thinks their life experience has been and what this person thinks their life experience has been can feel almost like you're listening to two completely separate stories. But I definitely have a number of patients who are extremely sad because they don't have any contact with their young adult children. And another scenario I see, which is similar, but where the parent has contact with their children, but the siblings have no contact with each other. And the parent feels like at Christmas time or Easter or special occasions, Mother's Day, there's this whole drama about who they're spending it with and who they're favoring. And I would love your take on that, sort of whenever families are really just very separated, and how to approach it, because it's a grief as well and a sadness for how you thought your life was going to look and how you thought your family was going to pan out, and it hasn't panned out that way at all.
100%. And I don't work in this on a regular basis. Of course, I do hear about it. I hear also from young people that want to at times explain to me why. Not that they haven't cut their parents off, but that they're very low contact, or they don't they don't go out of their way to talk to their parent. And I am someone who I experienced this with my own dad at one point. First of all, let me say, and I know it's been said before, two things. One, I don't think people cut their parents out of their life or distance themselves without good reason. I don't think that happens lightly. I think it's done with a lot of thought. At least I can say that from my own personal experience. When that happens, the more needy the parent is, the more they want to have contact, the less attractive they are to that young person. So that's not to say parents who have been cut off should not do anything. Of course not. But the more they try and contact and re-engage, and, sometimes you need to leave a little bit of time. In my case, I would say the same thing. Like, it would have irritated with me greatly if my dad had reached out continually to me. Having that distance from him, and really just occasionally he would reach out, and it would of course remind me of this rift, and it gave me a chance to really decide. I know we'll never have the kind of relationship that I would like to have with my dad, but do I want to have this anger, this hurt, dictate like my life? Or can I come to a place of peace and have a relationship with my dad, even if it's not the one that I would have envisioned or really needed? And it took, probably 18 months or 2 years for me to get to that place. And I know there's a lot of parents that have been cut off that feel like it's completely just out of the blue, and that it's just like random and they can't figure it out. I just don't think that young people do that without some reason. I'm not saying it's the best reason, or that, because you also have to remember, if we're talking about someone who's like, I don't know, in their late teens or early 20s, like their emotional maturity level isn't the same as yours in your 50s. And there might be, I'm sure there are some young people who cut their parents out, and they need to for good reason. So I guess what I'm saying is, I don't think it happens lightly. I think that parents, if this has happened to them, need to really look at and think about what could have contributed to that, and make changes while they are estranged. Make changes to the behavior and work on themselves, in the hopes that at some point that young person will want to work together to rebuild a different relationship.
A bit of introspection probably required, because there's something at the root cause of it all, I suppose.
That doesn't mean the young person didn't contribute to the problem either, right? So I'm in no way saying it's all the parents' fault or anything. I'm just saying, hopefully you have the ability to self-reflect and be accountable to any behavior changes that you feel need to be made in order to start a different relationship and repair with that young person, and giving them some time. Like I said, if my dad had been reaching out like every week to me, I'd have been like, screw. I mean, he gave me some time in between, and I needed that to decide what I wanted and what I could live with. And I think sometimes parents, if they can take a step back and work on themselves, at some point they may have a young person that decides to come back and say, I'd like to work on this.
Yeah, thank you for that. So Kim, I just want to round off by saying I think what I'm really hearing you say whenever we're parenting, our young adults, we do have to transition away from a role of being kind of the decision maker and that we probably were when our kids were younger, and we're now really the support crew. And that can be a hard transition, and it has to be something that we approach with honesty and I suppose some humility in that we didn't get a manual with this child, and we're just doing our best. And I think it's okay to also tell our kids and admit, look, I did that wrong, or I probably shouldn't have said that to you that way, and I think modeling, being able to apologize and acknowledge wrongdoing on our part and not getting it quite right or not being the support they needed can also go a long way to help them do the same in return.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I would say as your kids transition post high school into their 20s, right? Parents as partners, parents parenting with, coming up alongside of, collaborating if there's a problem. The parent not always having to think about what's the consequence? How do we fix this? It's sometimes our 20 somethings do need help and they do need guidance, but inviting them into finding the solution instead of always having to figure it out for them.
Yeah, 100%. So, Kim, if anyone listening would like to find you or work with you or read your book, can you tell us how they can get all the info?
Absolutely. They can go to my website, which is reallifeparentguide.com. And I'm also on Instagram and TikTok at Kim Muench, Muench, parent coach.
Amazing. Kim, thank you so much. I've absolutely loved our conversation. I've used up so much of your evening. I appreciate you very, very much and all your insights.
Thank you, Dr. Shauna. I loved having this conversation with you too.
Here are my 3 main takeaways from today's conversation with Kim Muench. Parenting young adults equals influence, not control. Your relationship matters more than your rules. And letting go creates growth for both sides. Thank you, Kim. Parenting doesn't end when school does, it just transforms. You'll find resources and references from today's episode in the show notes. If this resonated, please follow the show, share it with a friend, and leave us a voice note at allaboutyoupod.com/voicemail. I'd love to hear your questions for future episodes. And remember, this information is general in nature and not intended to replace personalised medical advice. Always speak to your healthcare provider for guidance about your own situation. I'm Dr. Shauna Watts, and I'll see you next time on All About You.